When you think of country music in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you think of Willie, Dolly, and Garth. But between the legends were artists who gave us one unforgettable song before disappearing completely. Today, we're revisiting 10 country one-hit wonders that topped the charts and then vanished without a trace. Some you'll remember instantly, others might surprise you. This is country radio, like you've never heard it before. Number 10, Swingin' by John Anderson, 1983. The fiddle kicks in first, a lonesome cry that cuts through the static. Then comes a walking bass line that sounds like it stumbled out of a honky-tonk at 2 a.m., still looking for one more dance. John Anderson's voice enters next, raspy and worn like an old pair of boots that have seen too many stages and not enough breaks. In 1983, it delivered something country radio had almost forgotten. This wasn't the polished Nashville sound dominating the airwaves. This was gritty, raw, and unapologetically traditional. Anderson had been knocking around Nashville since the mid-70s, writing songs during the day and playing dive bars at night. He'd signed with Warner Brothers in 1977, and while he'd managed a few modest chart entries, nothing had broken through. He was approaching 30, watching younger artists grab the spotlight while he remained in the shadows. Then everything changed. The track was recorded at Woodland Sound Studios in Nashville with producer Buddy Killen, a veteran who'd worked with everyone from Joe Tex to Dolly Parton. Killen heard something in Anderson's weathered delivery that others had missed. Where some producers might have tried to smooth out the rough edges, Killen leaned into them. He understood that Anderson's voice wasn't a flaw to be fixed, but the whole point. Brother was on the sofa, eating chai. The song itself was deceptively simple. A man watching life pass by from his front porch, remembering what used to be. Porch swings hanging in the shade. No grand statements, no sweeping production tricks, no stadium-sized choruses. Just storytelling stripped down to its core. And that fiddle, played by session legend Buddy Spitcher, became as memorable as the vocal itself. Every note felt lived in, authentic, real. Released in January 1983, Swingin' started climbing slowly. By spring, it had reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. It stayed there for weeks, becoming one of the year's biggest country hits. Radio couldn't get enough of it. Neither could fans who'd been starving for something authentic in an era increasingly defined by pop, crossover attempts, and synthesizers creeping into country music. But here's the twist. When I'm on the swing with her, she makes me. John Anderson didn't vanish because he failed. He kept recording throughout the 80s and 90s. He kept touring, playing 200 dates a year. He even scored other top 10 hits. But nothing ever matched the cultural moment of Swingin'. It became the song he'd be remembered for, the one that defined him, even as his career continued in smaller venues, county fairs, and eventually on independent labels. By the late 80s, Anderson had faded from mainstream country radio. The industry moved toward slicker production and younger faces. He became a cult favorite, respected by traditionalists and other artists, but largely forgotten by the wider audience that once made swingin' inescapable. Decades later, the song still shows up on classic country stations, a reminder of when one man's front porch observations became the sound of a generation, if only for a moment. Number 9, Don't Close Your Eyes by Keith Whitley, 1988.
A long time.
It opens with a gentle acoustic guitar, finger-picked and delicate. Then Keith Whitley's voice cuts through like he's confessing something in a dark room at 3 a.m. There's ache in every syllable, the kind that can't be manufactured or faked. You can hear it in the way he holds certain words, the way his voice cracks just slightly on the high notes. Don't Close Your Eyes wasn't just another country ballad competing for airtime. It was heartbreak distilled into 3.5 minutes, pure and uncut.
All this time.
Whitley had been part of the bluegrass world as a teenager, touring with the legendary Ralph Stanley and learning his craft on stages across Appalachia. By the time he made the move to Nashville in the early 80s, he'd already lived more music than most artists experience in a lifetime. He signed with RCA Records in 1984, but success had been frustratingly elusive. A few moderate hits climbed the charts without making real noise. Nothing major, nothing that felt like a breakthrough. Then came this song, written by Bob McDill, a master craftsman who'd penned hits for everyone, from Don Williams to Waylon Jennings. McDill understood how to write for voices like Whitley's, voices that carried weight and lived experience.
You still won't hear my...
The recording sessions took place at Soundstage Studios in Nashville, with producer Garth Fundis at the helm. Fundis had worked extensively with Don Williams and understood the power of restraint. He didn't bury Whitley's voice in layers of production or drown it in reverb. He let it breathe, let the pain come through unfiltered and immediate. The arrangement stayed minimal. Acoustic guitar, subtle strings, just enough instrumentation to support without interfering. The result was something that felt both polished and raw at the same time, professional, without losing its emotional honesty. When it was released in mid-1988, the song resonated immediately. It climbed to #1 and stayed there. Country radio played it constantly, sometimes multiple times in a single day. It wasn't just Whitley's biggest hit. It was one of the year's defining country ballads, the kind of song that stopped people in their tracks. Critics praised his emotional delivery. Fans connected with the vulnerability, the sense that this wasn't just performance, but confession. But this isn't a story with a happy ending. On May 9th, 1989, just as his career was reaching new heights and bigger things seemed inevitable, Keith Whitley was found dead in his home in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. Alcohol poisoning. He was 34 years old. The music industry was stunned. Here was an artist who'd finally broken through, who seemed destined for superstardom, gone before he could fully claim it. "Don't Close Your Eyes" became both his signature and his epitaph. While he'd had other hits and more were released posthumously, this was the moment that mattered, the one that showed what he was capable of. And it's why, technically, he fits this list. Not because he walked away or faded from relevance, but because tragedy erased what should have been a long, legendary career. He vanished, but not by choice. Number 8, Jose Cuervo by Shelley West, 1983. The song opens with a Tex-Mex groove, all guitars and attitude, with just enough twang to remind you it's still country. Then, Shelley West's voice comes in with a knowing smirk, like she's already 3 drinks ahead of you and having the time of her life. This wasn't a tearjerker or a heartbreak ballad. This was a drinking anthem disguised as country music, and in 1983, it was exactly what radio needed. Something fun, a little dangerous, and completely unpretentious. Shelley West came from country royalty. Her mother was Dottie West, a Grand Ole Opry star and hitmaker who'd been charting since the 1960s. Shelley had grown up around the business, watching from the wings as her mother became one of Nashville's most respected voices, but she wasn't content to ride on that legacy. She'd carved her own path as part of a duo with David Frizzell, grandson of the legendary Lefty Frizzell. They'd had genuine hits together, including "You're the Reason God Made Oklahoma," which had topped the charts in 1981. But this solo track was different. This was her chance to step out on her own, to prove she was more than just Dottie's daughter or David's duet partner. Written by Cindy Jordan, a songwriter who understood the fine line between clever and corny, the song was recorded at Treasure Isle Recorders in Nashville. The production, handled by Jim Ed Norman and Snuff Garrett, leaned into the playful nature of the lyrics without turning the track into a novelty. That was the trick. Make it fun without making it a joke. West's delivery walked that perfect line between celebration and caution, between having fun and having too much fun, between enjoying the moment and recognizing the regret that might follow. Jose Cuervo shot up the charts in the spring of 1983, eventually reaching number 2, just 1 spot away from the top, but close enough to matter. It became an instant bar staple, the kind of song that got requested every Friday night and knew how to get a crowd on their feet. Country fans loved it. Pop stations even picked it up, giving West crossover appeal that few country artists achieved. For a few months in 1983, Shelley West was everywhere. Radio, television, concert stages across the country. But follow-up singles never caught fire the same way. The industry couldn't quite figure out where to place her. Was she a serious artist or a novelty act? That one question haunted everything that came after. The shadow of her famous mother didn't help. Comparisons were inevitable and often unfair. Neither did the changing landscape of country music, which was starting to embrace a more conservative, traditional sound by the mid-80s as a reaction against the urban cowboy pop country wave. By 1985, Shelley West had quietly stepped back from the spotlight. She continued performing, mostly in smaller venues and as part of nostalgia tours. But Jose Cuervo remained her calling card, the one song that everyone knew, the one that still got requested. A fun, slightly dangerous anthem that captured a specific moment in country music when the genre was willing to take chances and not take itself too seriously. Number 7, Somebody's Knockin' by Terri Gibbs, 1981. A haunting piano sets the mood. Then Terri Gibbs' powerful voice cuts through with a warning. This wasn't a love song. This was temptation wrapped in a country arrangement, and in 1981, it was unlike anything else on country radio. The lyrics played with the idea of the devil at your door, desire versus conscience, sin versus salvation, all delivered by a 26-year-old blind pianist from Georgia who'd been playing bars since she was a teenager. Gibbs had grown up in a musical family in Augusta, performing at her father's club, the Terri Gibbs Showcase. She'd lost her sight at birth due to complications, but it never slowed her down. By her early 20s, she was playing 200 nights a year, building a following across the Southeast. A demo tape eventually made its way to MCA Records, and suddenly she had a shot at something bigger. The song was recorded at MCA's Nashville studios with producer Ed Penny, who understood that Gibbs didn't need elaborate production tricks. Her voice and piano work were the show. Penny kept the arrangement tight, letting the tension build naturally. Steel guitar and subtle strings added atmosphere without overwhelming the story. The result was sophisticated country that felt more like a thriller than a typical Nashville ballad. Somebody's Knockin' climbed the charts through late 1980 and into 1981, eventually reaching number 1 on the country charts. But it didn't stop there. The song crossed over to pop radio, reaching number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100. Terri Gibbs was suddenly everywhere. Talk shows, award shows, magazine covers. She earned a Grammy nomination and won the Academy of Country Music's Top New Female Vocalist Award. For a brief moment, she looked unstoppable, a fresh voice with undeniable talent and a compelling personal story. But follow-up singles couldn't capture the same lightning. Rich Man and Ashes to Ashes charted respectably, but never approached the success of her debut. The industry struggled to figure out where she fit. Was she country or pop, traditional or contemporary? The crossover success that seemed like a blessing became a curse, leaving her caught between formats with neither fully embracing her. By the mid-80s, radio had moved on. New artists with newer sounds pushed her aside. She continued recording for MCA for a few more years, then shifted to smaller labels and eventually gospel music. The mainstream spotlight that had found her so quickly disappeared just as fast. Today, Terri Gibbs still performs, mostly at churches and small venues across the South. Somebody's Knockin' remains her legacy, a perfect slice of early 80s country sophistication that proved a blind woman from Georgia could own country radio. For one shining moment, she had it all. Then, like the song itself warned, temptation passed and the door closed behind it. Number 6, Long Black Veil by The Band, 1968. Wait, the band wasn't country, you might say, and you'd be mostly right. They were rock musicians from Canada and Arkansas who'd backed Bob Dylan and played Woodstock. But this 1968 recording of a country standard became their biggest country chart hit and introduced a traditional murder ballad to a generation that had never heard it. Sometimes the best country music comes from the most unexpected places. The song itself was written in 1959 by Danny Dill and Mary John Wilkin, two Nashville songwriters who specialized in dark, story-driven material. The kind of songs where someone always ends up dead or in prison, where guilt hangs in the air like smoke. Lefty Frizzle had recorded the original version back then, giving it the mournful treatment it deserved, his voice carrying all the weight of regret and lost love. But it never became a major hit. The song lingered in the catalog, waiting patiently for the right artist at the right moment to give it the life it deserved. The band recorded their version at A&R Studios in New York City during the sessions for their debut album, Music from Big Pink. This was 1968, and everything was changing in American music. Producer John Simon understood what the song needed. He let the track breathe, building atmosphere through restraint rather than excess. Rick Danko's lead vocal carried the story with understated emotion, his voice cracking just slightly in all the right places. The sparse instrumentation created space for the narrative to unfold, allowing listeners to feel the weight of every line. Garth Hudson's organ swells added texture without overwhelming the story. When it was released as a single, something unexpected happened. Country radio stations started playing it alongside rock stations. The band had credibility in both worlds, a rare achievement in an era when genres were becoming increasingly defined and separated. Their mix of folk, rock, country, and blues defied easy categorization, and Long Black Veil became the bridge that connected them to traditional country audiences who might never have otherwise discovered their music. The track reached the top 40 on the country charts, an impressive feat for a group that wasn't marketed as a country act and had no intention of becoming one. It introduced the song to millions who'd never heard the earlier versions, giving new life to a 9-year-old composition that had been waiting for this moment. To this day, many people assume the band wrote it, not realizing they were covering a Nashville composition. But here's the thing. The band never became country artists. They drifted back toward rock and Americana, continuing to explore the roots of American music without committing to any single genre. Long Black Veil remained an outlier in their catalog, a one-time crossover that showcased their versatility but didn't define their direction. For country audiences, they appeared, made an unforgettable impression, and disappeared back into the rock world. A one-hit wonder, not because they failed, but because they never tried to replicate that country success. Number 5, The Door Is Always Open by Dave and Sugar, 1976. Sweet harmonies and a gentle country shuffle introduced this trio in 1976, the kind of opening that made you turn up the radio before you even knew what song it was. But it was the blend of voices that made people pay attention and stay. Dave Rowland's lead vocal wrapped around 2 female harmonies, creating something that sounded both familiar and fresh on country radio. It had the warmth of traditional country, but the polish of something bigger. Dave Rowland had been a session singer in Nashville for years, one of those voices you'd heard on 100 records without ever knowing his name. He'd been in the background, blending into other people's hits, lending his voice to countless recordings without ever stepping into the spotlight himself. It was solid work, steady income, but anonymous. Producer Buddy Killen saw potential for something more. Killen was a Nashville veteran who'd worked with everyone from Joe Tex to Dolly Parton, and he had an ear for what worked on radio. He convinced Rowland to take a chance and form a group to finally put that voice front and center. They brought in Vicky Hackeman and Jackie France as the sugar part of the equation, 2 singers who could harmonize effortlessly and complement Rowland's deeper tone. The song was recorded at Jack Clement Recording Studio in Nashville, a place known for its warm sound and relaxed atmosphere. Clement himself was a legend, having produced everyone from Johnny Cash to Waylon Jennings. Killen produced the session, but he kept it simple. He focused on the vocal blend rather than elaborate instrumentation or studio tricks. The result was pure country simplicity elevated by exceptional harmony work. Nothing fancy, nothing forced, just 3 voices working together perfectly. The Door Is Always Open climbed to number 1 on the country charts in late 1976. Radio loved it. Fans responded to the sincerity of the performance, the way it felt honest and unpretentious. For a few months, Dave and Sugar were the next big thing in country music. They had the sound, the look, and the momentum. Everything seemed aligned. But here's what happened. The trio couldn't settle on a consistent lineup. The Sugar part kept changing. Hackeman left first, then France. Different women rotated through the group over the next few years, each bringing their own style, but never quite recapturing that original chemistry. Without a stable identity, Dave and Sugar struggled to maintain their initial success. Follow-up singles charted, but never matched that first hit. Fans got confused. Radio programmers lost interest. By the early 80s, they'd faded from country radio completely. Rowland eventually returned to session work, back where he'd started. The various members of Sugar moved on to other projects, or left the business entirely. The Door Is Always Open remained their signature, a perfectly crafted slice of 70s country that showcased what they could have been if circumstances had aligned differently. They had the talent, they just couldn't hold it together. Number 4, Take This Job and Shove It by Johnny Paycheck, 1977. The opening line didn't ease you in or set a scene. It punched you right in the face with 5 words that every working person in America had thought at least once. Johnny Paycheck's gravelly voice delivered those words with the perfect mix of defiance and exhaustion, turning workplace frustration into a blue-collar anthem that transcended country music. Paycheck had been knocking around Nashville since the early 60s, playing bass for various acts and recording singles that went nowhere. He'd worked with George Jones, toured endlessly, and dealt with more than his share of personal demons. By the mid-70s, he was on his 3rd record deal with little to show for it. Then songwriter David Allan Coe walked into a bar one night and handed him a tape. The song was recorded at Treasure Isle Recorders in Nashville with producer Billy Sherrill, the legendary producer behind Tammy Wynette's biggest hits. Sherrill knew exactly what he had. He kept the production straightforward, building the arrangement around Paycheck's vocal and that unforgettable hook. Steel guitar, walking bass, and just enough attitude to let the message land without overwhelming it.
I've seen a lot of good folk die.
Released in late 1977, Take This Job and Shove It didn't just climb the charts, it exploded. It hit number 1 on the country charts and crossed over to pop radio, eventually reaching number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100. But more importantly, it became a cultural phenomenon. Working people everywhere adopted it as their unofficial anthem. The phrase entered the American lexicon. In 1981, they even made a movie with the same title. For a brief moment, Johnny Paycheck was one of the biggest names in country music. He appeared on television, played sold-out shows, and watched his earlier albums get re-released and repackaged to capitalize on his sudden fame. But here's what most people don't know. Despite that massive success, Paycheck never had another hit that came close. Follow-up singles charted, but none captured the lightning in a bottle moment of that one song. His personal life spiraled. Legal troubles mounted, including a highly publicized assault charge in the mid-80s that landed him in prison. By the 90s, Johnny Paycheck had become a cautionary tale. The man who'd sung about walking away from a bad situation couldn't escape his own. He passed away in 2003, and while Take This Job and Shove It remains instantly recognizable, few people remember anything else he recorded. The song became bigger than the man, existing in that strange space where everyone knows the lyrics but can't name the artist. It vanished him into his own success, reducing a complicated career to 5 defiant words that will outlive everything else he ever did. Number 3, I Love a Rainy Night by Eddie Rabbitt, 1981.
I love to hear the thunder, watch the lightning when it lights.
An infectious rhythm and Eddie Rabbitt's energetic vocal made this crossover smash impossible to ignore in 1981. It wasn't just country, it was pop, it was everywhere. And for a brief moment, Eddie Rabbitt was one of the biggest stars in American music. Rabbitt had been writing hits for years before becoming a performer. He'd penned songs for Elvis and Ronnie Milsap. When he finally stepped into the spotlight himself, his blend of country roots and pop sensibilities made him a perfect fit for the post-urban cowboy moment when the lines between genres were blurring. The track was recorded at Scruggs Sound Studio in Nashville with producers David Malloy and Dan Tyler. They crafted something radio-friendly without abandoning Rabbitt's country foundation. The production was bright, the melody was immediate, and the vocal was delivered with pure joy.
And wet.
I Love a Rainy Night didn't just top the country charts. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Pop stations played it as much as country stations. It sold millions. For a few months in 1981, Eddie Rabbitt was inescapable. But here's the thing. While Rabbitt continued having country hits throughout the 80s, he never matched this level of crossover success again. Pop radio moved on. Country radio eventually did too. By the 90s, his style felt dated compared to the new traditional movement and the young hat acts taking over Nashville. Rabbitt passed away in 1998, and with him went most of his catalog's visibility. Today, casual music fans know "I Love a Rainy Night" without necessarily remembering who sang it. It's become a time capsule of early 80s optimism, a song that feels like it exists outside any specific artist's identity. Eddie Rabbitt had a successful career, but this was the moment that defined him, and ironically, it's also the reason he's often forgotten. The song became bigger than the man, and when it faded from regular rotation, he faded with it. Number 2, At Harper Valley PTA by Jeannie C. Riley at 1968.
Teenage daughter who attended Harper.
A spoken word style delivery over a driving beat made this one of the most unusual country hits of the 1960s. And Jeannie C. Riley's voice dripped with attitude and sass as she told the story of a widow standing up to small-town hypocrisy. This wasn't a love song or a drinking song. This was social commentary wrapped in country music. The song was written by Tom T. Hall, one of Nashville's sharpest storytellers. He'd written it specifically for Riley after hearing her demo tape. Producer Shelby Singleton saw its potential immediately and booked studio time at Woodland Sound Studios in Nashville. The recording session was quick. Riley delivered the vocal in just a few takes, capturing the character's defiance and pride. The production was minimal by design, a few instruments, a steady rhythm, and that vocal front and center. No elaborate arrangements to distract from the story.
Here from the Harper Valley PTA.
Harper Valley PTA exploded. It went to number 1 on both country and pop charts in 1968, selling millions of copies. Riley became an overnight sensation. The song sparked conversations about hypocrisy, women's liberation, and small-town politics. It was more than a hit. It was a cultural moment, but Riley could never escape it. Every follow-up was compared to Harper Valley PTA. None came close. The industry tried to replicate the formula. It didn't work. Within a few years, her chart success had dried up completely. By the mid-70s, Jeannie C. Riley had shifted toward gospel music and smaller venues. She continued performing the song that made her famous, but she'd become a nostalgia act decades before that term was common. Harper Valley PTA had given her everything and taken everything away. One massive hit that was so perfect, so specific to its moment, that it could never be topped or even approached again. She didn't vanish by choice. The business simply stopped calling. Number 1, Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On by Mel McDaniel, 1984. The song bounds out of the speakers with an upbeat rhythm, and Mel McDaniel's gritty vocals celebrating something simple: a woman in blue jeans. That's it. No complicated metaphors, no heartbreak. Just pure, uncomplicated joy delivered with enough energy to fill a stadium. McDaniel had been working the honky-tonk circuit for decades before this moment. He had grown up in Oklahoma, influenced by Bob Wills and Western swing. By the time he landed a deal with Capitol Records in the late 70s, he'd already paid his dues 10 times over. Early singles charted modestly. Nothing spectacular. Then came this song, written by Bob McDill. They recorded it at Capitol Studios in Los Angeles, an unusual choice for a country record. Producer Bob Montgomery wanted a bigger sound than what most Nashville studios were delivering. The result was bright, commercial, and perfectly suited for early 80s country radio, which was still riding the urban cowboy wave. Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On went to number 1 in 1984. It stayed there for weeks. Country stations couldn't stop playing it. The song felt effortless, like it had always existed. McDaniel's vocal had character without being showy. Everything clicked, but the success was short-lived. Follow-up singles charted, but none captured the same lightning. By the late 80s, country music was shifting again. The new traditionalists were taking over. McDaniel's brand of upbeat, straightforward country started to feel out of step. He kept touring, playing fairs and festivals, but the hits stopped coming. By the 90s, he'd become another name on the nostalgia circuit. In 2011, Mel McDaniel passed away, and his obituary focused almost entirely on that one song. The hit that should have launched a legendary career but instead became his entire legacy, compressed into 3 minutes. Baby's Got Her Blue Jeans On still shows up on classic country stations. It's the kind of song that makes you smile when it comes on. Simple, genuine, perfectly crafted. But ask casual country fans who sang it, and most will draw a blank. The song outlived the artist's fame, existing in that strange space where the music remains, but the person behind it has vanished. That wraps up our list of 10 country one-hit wonders who vanished without a trace. From front porch observations to blue jean celebrations, these artists gave us moments we still remember, even if their names have faded. If you want to keep exploring forgotten country classics, don't miss our next video on lost honky-tonk anthems from the 1970s. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep the music alive.